And we're back one more time, the last time for this particular video production. We are once again talking about Microsoft Certified Solutions Associates track, Windows Server 2012 from Microsoft Learning, and we're doing an objective domain review of the 3 courses / exams involved in that track, 70-410, 411, and 412, all relating to Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2. I'm Christopher Chapman, the instructor for the day, content project manager and planner on the Server and System Center team here at Microsoft Learning. And we're up to our third bullet item, which is 7412, configuring advanced Windows Server 2012 services. That's pretty much all we're going to do for the slides. We're going to go right to where we've been this whole time in terms of content. I've already brought up the 70-412 exam page on Microsoft Learning. Sorry, I got to get it on the screen. I got to hit the right buttons for you guys to be able to see what I'm doing. And here we are. We're looking right at the page already. So we're going to scroll down to the same section we've been in before for the other 2 courses, in the skills measured section, with its note about, as of January 2014, this exam includes content covering Windows Server 2012 R2. We are into 412. We've done 410, pretty much the basics, installing, configuring, seeing the tools, getting familiar with the tools, maybe some of the capabilities and functionality of Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2. We've done 411, which adds to that list of tools, features, and roles and available options for Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2, as well as expanding a little bit on some of the topics from 410. We got a little bit deeper into DHCP and DNS. We got a little bit deeper into some remote access strategies, a little bit more storage, and a little bit of distributed storage. 412 is not much new, it's just deeper. There is some new, there's a little bit, we'll talk a little bit about what's new, but it's really just more complex, more advanced parts of the same technologies we've already talked about and learned about. And again, I'll try and give you some sort of pseudo demos. I've got my demo environment up right now, so if we need that, we'll be able to use it. And well, we may or may not. We'll see. We're going to jump right in. Configure and manage high availability. This is one of the new sections in this course, 412. We haven't talked about network load balancing. We haven't talked about clustering in 410 or 411. The nice thing about that is when you're prepping for 410 and 411, you don't have to worry about NLB, which is what we call network load balancing, or clustering ahead of time. Those ones, not high availability. Once you get into 412, you need to learn high availability. Now, clustering has come a long way in 10 years. It did not used to be what it is now in terms of ease of setup, configuration, and management. And I would say, as I've said with other things that we've done so far, or other things we've talked about and covered in this video in the last couple of hours, is do it. Build it. Find 2 computers. Try and find a third for storage if you can do it. Build a cluster. Cluster a simple service. There are going to be some step-by-steps available that you can find that will let you do that, or kind of get your way through it as you go using resources available. I would say there's a course. The 412 course is going to talk about clustering. It is a great resource. Some very key technologies. I'll start at the top here. NLB, install nodes. Those are just the different servers involved in what's called a network load balancing cluster. NLB prerequisites, configure affinity, which servers are preferred for failover when something goes wrong. Configure port rules, cluster operation mode. I will clarify something. Network load balancing and a failover cluster are different. You'll hear the word cluster used in both cases. You'll hear the phrase NLB cluster, as I just used, or hear configuring a cluster operation mode. Network load balancing and failover clustering are different. They're configured differently. They have different options. They are different services and different levels of providing those services and those availabilities. So make sure you don't get them confused just because the word cluster is used across the boundary. Network load balancing is one. Failover clustering, usually just called clustering, is the other. And upgrade an NLB cluster, if you already have one in place, you'll have to know the process for upgrading it without impacting availability of your existing services. NLB is relatively straightforward relative to clustering, which is where I'm going to spend more of my time today. I would say learn as much as you can. These are technologies where it can't hurt to learn more. So do that, and you'll be prepared for this exam. Again, the 5-day course, the 412 course, is going to be a very, very, very good way to prepare for this exam. You're going to get the hands-on, you're going to get to configure this, you're going to get to see it work in action in a lab environment. And then the additional resources that we'll talk about at the end for your self-study, if that's your Poison or book or whatever the case may be. Failover clustering, I'm very happy about this description because the very first item on the list is what makes failover clustering complicated. Well, it's one of many things, but it's probably the most complicated conceptually, and that is quorum. Although the simple equation is it's much like a meeting. To have a meeting of people in a group that are voting for something, you have to have enough people at that meeting to have a vote that can be valid. That's a quorum. This is the same way at the end of the day. Having enough nodes in a failover cluster present to essentially determine, based on which quorum mode you've used, to determine if that cluster is still viable or not. As much as as I've had the trouble today going through this, would love to talk more about this, to go into great depth and spend hours on clustering, which I would be very want to do. We can't today, we just don't have the time. So for now, quorum, big topic, very big topic. When you get into failover clustering, quorum is going to be huge. Cluster networking, you're going to have to set up dedicated IPs and virtual IPs for your actual physical servers and the services you're providing with the cluster. Restoring, if you lose nodes or you lose an entire cluster, how do you get it back without having to go through an entire manual reconfiguration? Cluster storage, this gets complicated as well. We're drifting back off into the weeds when we talk about cluster storage because you have options. We've got SANs, we've got network attached storage, we've got local storage, we've got direct attached storage, we've got potentially storage spaces. There are just a lot of options for what you can use to host data or host services on a cluster. Not to say they're all viable, not to say they're all great decisions, but you're going to have different circumstances that require learning which ones do what. So quorum, huge. Networking, huge. Storage, huge. But these are actually bigger topics just across Microsoft's portfolio in general. Networking and storage are two of the biggest in everything we do these days. Cluster-aware updating, which is to say you don't want all of your nodes to be taken offline at one time to do an update, to install a patch, because you lose the service. And the whole point of having a cluster is not to lose the service. Upgrading a cluster, configuring and optimizing clustered shared volumes. I would say you're going to run across clustered shared volumes in your studies of volumes and disks and storage throughout 4.10 and 4.11. If you want to hold off until you're getting ready for 4.12, I would say that's okay. It's a perfectly fine strategy. You're not going to run into CSVs in 4.10 or 4.11. However, if you want the extra knowledge, if you want to start preparing ahead of time, if you want to know where this is going to be good when you get to clustering in 4.12, by all means, learn it. Configure cluster without network names. That one's not as crucial. And configure storage spaces. We talked about storage spaces in 4.11. You'll cover it again in 4.12, but by this point, you should have a pretty good idea of 4.11. And really what you'll be working more on is figuring out how storage spaces and clusters work together, how to connect them, basically. Failover clustering roles. I would say, for the sake of the 4.12, you're not going to have to know all of the details of all of the roles and how they work with clustering. Not all the roles are appropriate for clustering. Active Directory, not. Good example. I mean, it's an outlandish example, but it is an example. You're going to have to be aware as you decide to cluster different roles what the requirements are for doing that. Exchange and SQL as services have their own semi-pseudo clustering mechanisms built into them. So whether or not you do failover clustering in Windows with Exchange and SQL is going to depend on a lot of other factors. But this one, I mean, for the sake of the 4.12 exam, trying to tell you that you need to know all of the role-specific settings for all of the roles in Windows and clustering, probably a little bit of overkill. It's good information to have. Go over it in your test environments. Not going to be a massive percentage of the exam. Manage VM movement, live migrations, quick migrations, storage migrations. This is virtualization. This is Hyper-V in this case. We're not into VMM. This is just Hyper-V and clustering in Windows. As you learn about Hyper-V, and we talked about Hyper-V in the 4.10 course, once you've got the 4.10 topics figured out, virtual machine creation and management, storage creation and management, and network storage and management, you can get into some of the high availability features of Hyper-V. It's got a number of them built in 2012 and 2012 R2. We've introduced a fair number of Hyper-V features into the product itself. So live migrations, quick migrations, and storage migrations, you may have come across already in your studies of Hyper-V before you get to the clustering module or the clustering objective domain of the 412 exam. So you may already know some of these topics. If you don't, by all means, study them, learn them, figure out how they're implemented and at what level you manage them. Import, export, and copy VMs, configure VM network health protection, and configure drain on shutdown. So these, again, are all features within Hyper-V. They're slightly more advanced, but not any more complicated in terms of actually carrying out the activity. Performing a quick migration is relatively straightforward. Performing an export of a VM is really simple. You right-click the VM and you export. You give it a path. But it's just the next level. There are things you don't necessarily have to learn for the 410 and the 411. You can slowly ramp up over time. When you're getting ready for the 412, you're going to start coming into these more advanced topics for some of the things. And I mentioned 412 is mostly more advanced topics into technologies we've already talked about in 410 and 411. File and storage solutions, advanced file services. In fact, we're at the point now they don't even give the titles names, so just advanced file services. We've covered file services, we've covered more file services in 411, now we're getting advanced. Network file system, branch cache for maintaining availability of files across geographical boundaries that may have slow WAN links where you want those files available somewhere else. File classification infrastructure using File Server Resource Manager and access auditing. We can essentially tag files based on a number of different criteria. And again, it would be hours and hours and hours for us to go in and look at that criteria. Just know that it's available. Know that file classification infrastructure exists. It's new-ish. And learn about how it works. Again, find the interfaces, go through the checkboxes, go through the submit buttons, see what it's doing. Part of the reason I like to do that, I don't know if I've mentioned this in these videos so far, part of the reason I'm a big proponent of doing by hand, even in a home environment, even if you are or have taken a mock course, a 5-day course, is things aren't always going to go well. Something may break. I may go to set up this file classification infrastructure and it won't work. The difference between my home or my office or my test network, wherever, and the classroom is my environment may not be built to guarantee my success configuring one of these new features. I can build it, I can see it break, I can figure out how to troubleshoot it, and actually learn more about it in the process. If I'm doing my own hands-on, take the course, after the course, go home and practice. Take the course during the course each night, go home and practice. On servers that aren't pre-configured for labs. Try it out, see if it breaks. If it breaks, see how to fix it. If it works the first time, terrific. We're hoping that that's the case. We're trying to build everything easy enough that hopefully it works the first time, I think. Dynamic access control, user and device claim types. We haven't talked about claims, so you may not know about claims. Claims are basically, well, I mean, I hate to use the word self-referentially, but it is a claim about a user or group, essentially. For instance, in Active Directory, I've got my name, I've got my user account, I've got my password. I've also got a company field. I can set a rule, a claim, on, let's say, a folder that says everyone whose company is X gets read permissions to this folder. I don't have to create a group for that company. I'm reading information about that user account from another data store and basing permissions on what I'm reading. So it makes things a little bit more dynamic in the front end for managing permissions. Anyone who's part of department, the HR department in AD, HR is a department, gets permissions to this folder. If someone moves from the HR department to another department, I change that department field. I don't have to worry about group memberships. I don't have to worry about account permissions. It's all done automatically because I'm using dynamic access control. Claim types, yes. Policy changes and staging, yes. Perform access denied remediation. If I can't get to something, what are my next steps? Why can't I get to it and can I fix that? Configure file classification. Again, we need to be able to, and we saw this in the last bullet, file classification infrastructure. We need to be able to potentially, or at least as much as possible, automatically classify these files so that we're cutting out even more of the day-to-day management work. Create and configure central access rules and policies. We did see mention of this a little while earlier. I'm trying to remember where we saw central access rules and policies. I don't remember, but we have seen that before. Create and configure resource properties and lists. This is another one of those topics that you can learn the basics. The basics will do well for this exam. Implementation is great. Do a couple of test runs at home. Do a couple of test runs in a classroom, in a lab environment. You should be set for the exam. You're going to learn how to do it. You're going to learn how to set up dynamic access control. That's not to say that that's going to teach you how to design an infrastructure, what tags to use, how to give different people different permissions, what your internal processes are for managing Active Directory information about users so that this actually works. There are more advanced pieces to it. Configure and optimize storage. I like this. I like that it says optimize storage because that is an endeavor of all on its own. Multiple types of storage, multiple speeds of storage, multiple sizes of storage, multiple connection options for storage. You're going to have your job, you're going to have your hands full. Configure iSCSI target and initiator. This is if we want to do SANs using Microsoft software. Configure internet storage name server. Thin provisioning and trim. And manage server free space using features on demand and configured tiered storage. A lot of these are new features. Well, some of them are new features to 2012 and 2012 R2. The tiered storage is new, where you can tell an array of disks, some of which are solid state, some of which are not. They're going to have different performance categories. You can tell those drives to monitor which data is used the most and move that data to the faster drives, the solid state drives in this case, to increase performance. We haven't talked about this in a little while, so I will refresh really fast on the preparation resources per section. Network file system, FSRM, File System Resource Manager, which we did learn about in 4.11. You will have already seen in 4.11, but we get deeper here. And Dynamic Access Control Scenario Overview. This is a great exercise for anybody who's not seen or used Dynamic Access Control. And then, after all of that heavy-hitting, high availability and file and storage solutions, we actually come to what I hate to say is a pretty simple category. Business continuity and disaster recovery. Backups. Backups. Dare I say backups? What do you think? I'm going to chat with my producer in the back. Do I use the word simple with Microsoft technology? Backups aren't that bad. Windows Server backup, the first thing they talk about right here, dare I say it's easy. It really is. It's easy to configure. It works reliably, at least it always has for me. It's great. Configure Windows Azure Backup. You can now, Microsoft Azure Backup, no longer Windows Azure as of a couple of weeks ago. Role-specific backups and manage VSS settings using VSS Admin. Depending on what you're backing up, Windows Server Backup may be able to take advantage of VSS for the sake of that software. Recover servers, restore from backups. It's really not that much harder than backing the servers up in the first place, depending on what you want to do. Restoring from disk or from tape or from some other media to a drive that has failed is pretty easy. I know I use that word easy again. I'm trying to avoid it. This, a bare metal restore and a recover servers using Windows recovery environment do get a little bit more complex, but even then, the complexity it's on a sliding scale. So complex for here is not necessarily complex for Active Directory or group policy. Safe mode you may have seen, and configuring the BCD store. This is how you boot. It's what used to be our old boot.ini. You could go in and make changes, configure additional operating systems, multiple partitions. BCD is the new way to do that. Site level fault tolerance, Hyper-V replica. Here we get into, as opposed to backups, as opposed to having data available that we can get back if we lose it in the first place, this skips ahead to don't lose it in the first place. Fault tolerance means we can lose something and it stays up. Hyper-V replica, a nice new feature in Windows where I can have a VM on standby on an additional Hyper-V host. Hyper-V replica broker and VMs don't make much difference. Configure multi-site clustering. And this, I like reading these lists. This is where it gets into fun. We've gone from clustering in the first section to multi-site clustering. And the next bullet, including network settings, quorum, and failover settings. This is for multi-site. We've already gotten more exciting. Configure Hyper-V Replica Extended Replication, Global Update Manager, which we now have the ability to manage Hyper-V replicas and updates from Azure. That's as much as I'm going to go into it. We can manage it from Azure. So configuring network services is next. We've gone through that wraps up business continuity and disaster recovery. Again, after high availability and storage solutions, backup or business continuity and disaster recovery is going to be pretty easy. Configuring network services, we've seen these. Well, we've seen 2 of the 3. We've seen DHCP, we've seen DNS. We're just getting more advanced. You look at DHCP, super scopes and multicast scopes. DHCP v6, we talked about in the 410. You may see it. You probably won't have to worry much about DHCP for IP6 in 410. High availability for DHCP, which again, not something you need to worry about for 410, but it is an option, including failover and split scopes, and configuring name protection and DNS registration using DHCP. So we're just farther down the rabbit hole at this point with DHCP. DNS is the same thing. And it's all, the consoles don't change. That's something I can show you. Oh, or I can't because I gotta log in. There we go. And let me get my screen up right, because if I don't, my producer's gonna yell at me. We get that. And let's minimize that so that I can log in with Hyper-V. The consoles don't change. These advanced DHCP and DNS categories or options are in the same consoles we already used. DHCP. They talk about IP6 scopes. They're right here. You're going to configure them right alongside IP4 scopes. Properties. We've got advanced properties there. I don't have a scope up and running. So, and again, I'm venturing into technical territory that we don't necessarily need to cover today. But just know DHCP and DNS, both the advanced topics right here, are in the same consoles that we were in before. Configure security for DNS, DNS security extensions or DNSSEC, DNS socket pool and cache locking. These things are going to be in the console, but DNS, this is another one of those areas where we diverge. We get into depth pretty quick. All of these topics in DNS are pretty advanced topics. They're going to be topics that, as an administrator, you're going to have specific needs for these features. It's not just a matter of, hey, I'm a new administrator, I work on this network, let's do some of these DNS advanced features because we can. Not necessarily. DNSSEC is a big one. It's a relatively new addition to the Windows Server feature list. DNS socket pool and cache locking. DNS logging may be huge, depending on if you're having trouble with DNS, having trouble with name resolution. A great pointer that you're going to come across in 410 before you ever start Active Directory. DNS is required for AD. If DNS is broken, AD is broken, and the ramifications of that could be pretty large in your environment. Delegated administration, we've seen this before. This is just a matter of figuring out how we as administrators can allow other administrators, junior administrators, or maybe even other people to manage certain features. I can do that with DNS, just like I can do it with many other tools we've looked at so far today. Recursion, netmask ordering, configure global name zone. Of these ones, they're really just going to be things you're going to look up. DNS recursion, netmask ordering. It's a matter of reading and doing. It's a matter of sitting in a course and spending the time. I can say a global name zone, single label names in a domain hierarchy. So instead of having server name dot domain name dot high level, in my case, I've got Contoso. And on this, or in this network, I've got a computer that the name is kind of obnoxious. I didn't rename it, so that's my fault. win-sokduv8isf or isdf.contoso.com. I may have applications that don't have that whole path. They're just application. That's the name of the box, application. How do I find it when DNS always requires a hierarchical naming scheme? Well, I find it by using global names. Single label names in an Active Directory environment. IPAM is new. This again is one of the rare new features we're going to see in this module or in this section. The easiest way to explain it for people who haven't seen it or done it, it's centralized IP management, and that's why it's called IPAM, IP Address Management. It's a way to centralize DNS and DHCP administration, basically. And it's an oversimplification, but that's the idea. Provision it manually or by using group policy. Configure server discovery. Create and manage blocks and ranges. Again, these are all things that they may be on the exam. It may be at this level. Managing IP blocks and ranges, absolutely. Monitor utilization of the IP address space. This is part of the function of IPAM, is to make sure you know of the address space you built when you started, how much of it's left and how much of it is in use. I don't even know that I need to intro this one, do I? What do you think? What do you think, producer? We've talked about AD a lot. We've gotten more advanced with Active Directory in every one of these courses. Now, in the first two, we talked about AD users, groups, OUs. We talked about a single domain controller, possibly a small network, where we really have a small contained environment. These topics, I like how it says at first, configure a forest or domain. But then the first bullet under that is implement multi-domain and multi-forest Active Directory environments. So we're taking the knowledge we've learned of a single Active Directory domain or a single Active Directory organizational unit, users, computers, groups, group policy, and we're expanding that out. We're creating multiple domains and multiple forests across our infrastructure, maybe across the globe geographically. Interoperability with previous versions. There are going to be periods of migration. Upgrading existing domains and forests. This is one of those kind of constant battles in IT, at least in the IT experience I have, where some people are very vehement about bring it up new, create it new, move content over, as opposed to upgrading in place. That's going to be up to you. That's something you're going to want to learn, and you're going to know that those are the options for upgrading an existing domain in Windows Server 2012 R2. Functional levels, very important. Know what the functional levels are, although you should, I would say you'll probably run across functional levels before you get to a multi-domain, multi-forest AD conversation. Whether or not those functional levels matter in a smaller domain, whether they're domain or forest roles, how do I explain it? Functional levels determine the domain controllers you can have, what version. What version you have determines what features they provide. Because of that, you're going to learn about functional levels early on. That's what I was trying to say. I kind of got lost there in my own head, I guess. You'll learn about these earlier on than getting to the 412 content because they determine the functionality of Active Directory at the very beginning when you're implementing it. Multiple user principal names, suffixes. It's a cool feature. It's a way for people to log in that makes things easier. It's not complicated. You can learn this in just a couple of minutes. It's it's not too bad at all, actually. Configure trust. I almost want to show this off. It's just one setting inside of one of the Active Directory management tools to add suffixes. Trust. This actually relates very much to the implement multi-domain and multi-forest environments. You can also create trusts. Different kinds of trusts. Ways to get your resources to users outside of your organization, or ways to get your users in your organization access to outside resources. External forest, shortcut, and realm trusts. You'll want to know these definitions, absolutely, what the different types of trust are. Trust authentication, SID filtering, maybe. Name suffix routing. This is going to depend on a lot of different things in terms of having trusts and having different namespaces across boundaries. Sites. Configure sites and subnets. Again, we're in Active Directory. So in forests and domains up top, when we talked about implementing multi-domain and multi-forest AD, we talked about taking the one potentially simple environment you've used up to this point, maybe the one environment you've used to study 410 and 411, maybe a smaller environment at work, a test environment you built for that sake. And that's one aspect. There's also the option or the method to make the domain you have, the one domain, broader. Sites, subnets, site links. I could make one Active Directory domain. Instead of having multiple domains across geographic boundaries, or even multiple forests across geographic or business boundaries, I can just make my one domain bigger. include sites, include different geographical locations, configure replication across those boundaries. These all go together. Configuring sites and managing AD and sysvol replication, these connect together. And this is the 412. You're into advanced services. You can expect that this is going to be some dense content, and you're going to need to know most of it. I mean, of these topics here, sites and subnets are definitely going to be required. Site links, yep. Registration of SRV records should be, yeah. Move domain controllers between sites. That one's a little bit more interesting. That one's a little bit more obscure because it's not something you're going to do very often. So couldn't hurt to look into it. I'll say that much. The last one, Active Directory and sysvol. How to explain this? It says in here, configure replication to read-only domain controllers, which we haven't even talked about since 411, the last course, which means you'll learn about it then. Read-only domain controllers are a very specialized function of Windows. It's a very small specialized function of Windows, so it's not terribly intensive. When you start learning about read-only domain controllers, you're going to figure out replication, all these options right here, password replication policy. You will have covered this or seen this or read this in studying for the 411 and possibly the 410. So by now, you're just kind of fine-tuning. Our last section, identity and access solutions. This one, I love coming up with these ways to explain these topics. These are just new roles. They're very simple. You have not seen these roles yet, and you're studying for 410, 411, and up till now in 412. The other modules, the other sections, the other objective domains for the other courses don't touch on these topics very much. So you're going to get to the end of 412, and now you've got some new things to learn that are fresh for you, completely new out of the box. Active Directory Federation Services, Active Directory Certificate Services, and Active Directory Rights Management Services. They do put in here managed certificates. That's, to me, in my head, a subset of install and configure ADCS. It is all part of the same package. The topics on here, install ADFS, yes. Install a CA, yes. Install a licensing or certificate ADRMS server. It's what each of these sections starts with installing. Go through that process, install one. ADFS, again, claims-based authentication. That's what Federation Services is based on. If you've already done the claims-based authentication for the sake of dynamic access control, that may help you with some of the concepts here. If you start with Active Directory Federation Services, it may help you with dynamic access control when you get to that point. Relying party trusts, configure authentication policies. A lot of this is who can use FS. I'm creating a connection to another organization with Active Directory Federation Services. Who can use that pipe, and who can access things on the other side of that pipe? Those are some of the big questions. Authentication policies, multi-factor authentication possibly. That may be a requirement of the other side of the equation, whoever you're connecting to for services. ADCS, I'm going to go right off into the deep end here and say the same thing I said about Active Directory in 410. You're going to spend a fair amount of time here. I can't say don't study this, do study this, don't study this. No, ADCS is a big topic. If you're studying for the 412, spend the time. It's going to be worth it later. One, to pass the exam, and two, understanding certificate services in a modern enterprise is a very, very handy skill, which will probably serve you well. Enterprise Root CA, or an Enterprise Certificate Authority, CRLs, online responders, all of these are ways to get and validate certificates. And those certificates ensure identities and encrypt or assist in encrypting data between endpoints. As I said, managing certificates is a subset of ADCS. It's all part of the same package. Learn the tools. There are a number of tools, both command line and graphical interface, that you should learn and know and be prepared to use. Install and configure Active Directory Rights Management Services. It's interesting to me this one's last, but it is here. This is a way for me as a user, and I do wish I could show you this because it's a pretty straightforward demo. A way for me as a user to create a document, put content in that document, attach that document to an email, but control what people can do with that content. And it's all a matter of encrypting it, having applications that understand that it's been encrypted, and when someone tries to open it saying, this is encrypted, it's being protected by rights management services, I need to go out to a server and see if I have the permissions to even open this file, much less do things to it, read it, print it, forward it, delete it. This is another one of those just do. As opposed to CS, there's going to be a fair amount of reading in certificate services and a fair amount of hands-on. You're going to want that hands-on. I would say if any of the modules in all of these courses would drive you into a classroom with an instructor and peers to do this by hand, these three may be three of your biggest. Depending on your enterprise, they may be very highly used or maybe potentially highly used in the near future. And they're complicated. Sitting down in a room with people who know what they're doing, people who've done this, people who are doing this in their current environments, going to be very valuable. Just like Active Directory and group policy, get in front of it, use it, play with it, be in a room with your peers, ask them about what they're doing with it or what they're learning about it, and an instructor who's been there. I think that wraps this one up. We have the same resources we've had before. Instructor-led training 20412B. Terrific course, and C, as you can see on the screen. All the things we've talked about, you're going to learn how to do them. This objective domain tells you what we're looking for, what's going to be covered on the exam. And I can't go into more detail. I wish I could go into detail on, how many questions relate to installing a licensing or certificate ADRMS server. I can't because even I don't know. I'm not on the exam team, and they make sure, according to the standards we operate under, that it's as removed as possible. I can't even give you that information. I can tell you kind of topically where you're going to get more and less content in an exam based on these specific bullet points. Exam prep videos, we've got the same video we had before. Jay Seymour and Rick Claus talking to you about 412. Self-paced training, we've got another Jumpstart. This is the same one we saw in the 411. And our Jumpstarts are essentially live events that we broadcast for end users. And really, maybe that's something I should bring up with this audience is, if you don't know about Microsoft Virtual Academy, go take a look at Microsoft Virtual Academy. If you do know about Microsoft Virtual Academy, hopefully you also know about Microsoft official courses, these MOOCs, what we call a MOOC. Practice tests, same vendors, Kaplan, MeasureUp, Transcender. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. There's a From the Community, but it's a book. And the book is going to be the same thing that's under books. So either way, you're looking at the same information. Other than that, that takes care of our MCSA track. That takes care of the 3 first exams to get your first Microsoft certified, first certification really, first overall certification, Microsoft Certified Solutions Associate. 410, 411, 412. There's lots of content. It's a lot to think about, especially if you're new to product or even new to technology. It's a lot to think about. It can be done in small consumable pieces. I would say use these guides, use the prep guides, use our presentations, and the learning website as a template for learning on your own a little bit. Once you've got a decent foundation, you're familiar with getting around the operating system and some of these interfaces, go take a 5-day course, get immersed, get hands-on and learn this all by actually doing it with other people in the room helping you out and an instructor in front of you at your disposal. But that's it. That's all I've got. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully I've given you a better idea, a little bit better idea of what to expect on the exam, what to prepare for a little bit more technically, just a little. I am going to put this on the screen as a resource because I forgot to earlier. So I'm putting myself on the resources page for everyone here to be able to get a hold of me. There you go. Christopher, MVA at Microsoft.com. It is an email that I check periodically. I may not be instantly responsive, but I will hopefully try and get back to you. I'm also on Facebook. If you do a search for Christopher Chapman, you should find my Microsoft page. And I think that's about it. I probably have a Twitter too, but I'm not really using it as much as I should. So don't look for me there. I probably won't see it. But that's what I've got. So get out there, get prepared, take some 410, 411, 412 exams. If you've watched these videos and you take some exams or you start using some of the resources presented, let me know what you think. Email me, let me know. I took the test, I passed it, the video was great. I took a course, it was great. or it wasn't great. We'd like to know either way. We like improving the things that we're sending out. So I will hope to hear back from you as soon as possible, and good luck.